My mother's voice on speakerphone. If she doesn't pull through, just let me know. We're in the middle of a treatment at the spa, and I'm not canceling my cruise for a broken bone. That was the moment I realized my mother wouldn't save my life, but my 68-year-old grandfather would. I'm Emma. I was 16. I had a shattered pelvis. Surgery was needed within hours, but my mother was on a cruise ship, 2,000 miles away, and refused to authorize the procedure. I could die. And she told them to just notify her if that happened. My grandfather didn't panic. He pulled out his iPhone, opened the voice recorder app, and started documenting everything. Every conversation, every refusal, every medical warning. 6 months later, he walked into family court with a 47-page binder of evidence that no judge could ignore. This is the story of how a teenager's worst day became the beginning of her real family, and how one man used a smartphone to make sure her mother could never hurt her again. My name is Emma. I'm 19 now. But when I was 16, I learned something that changed everything. Your mother is supposed to protect you. Mine chose a vacation. Let me take you back. April 2023. My family was hosting our annual spring gathering at my aunt's house in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was one of those perfect desert afternoons. 75 degrees. Clear skies. Everyone outside by the pool. I should tell you about my mother first. Her name is Diane. She's 42. Works in pharmaceutical sales. Makes decent money. Loves her twice-yearly cruises more than anything else in the world. More than me, as it turned out. Growing up, I always felt like an inconvenience to her. She had me young, 23. She wasn't ready, and she never let me forget it. When I needed help with homework, she was on the phone. When I had a recital, she had a work dinner. But she was there for the big family events, the ones with photos, the ones where people could see her. She'd smile, she'd hug me, she'd post about how proud she was, and then we'd go home, and she'd go back to her room, and I'd go back to being invisible. My grandfather, on the other hand, was different. His name is Robert. He's my mom's father. Retired Marine, 68 years old, lives alone in a small house 20 minutes from us. He was at every recital, every game. Every time my mom couldn't be bothered, he showed up. He taught me how to drive, how to change a tire, how to balance a checkbook. He's the one who helped me apply for college. He's the one who told me I mattered. So when the accident happened, I wasn't surprised that my mother wasn't there. But I was surprised by what she said. Here's what happened. I was at the party, talking to my cousin by the pool, and my uncle, who'd had a few drinks, thought it would be funny to push me in. He didn't know I was standing on the edge of the concrete steps. He didn't know the angle. He didn't know I'd land wrong. I hit the steps, hip first. I heard the crack before I felt the pain. And then the pain hit, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just remember screaming, and then nothing. I woke up in an ambulance. My grandfather was next to me. His hand was on my arm. He said, "Emma, you're okay. I'm here. I'm not leaving." The paramedics said I had a pelvic fracture, possibly severe. They needed to get me to the hospital immediately. They needed parental consent for surgery. They asked where my mother was. My grandfather said she was on a cruise. He'd been trying to call her. No answer. We got to the hospital. Scottsdale Osborne Medical Center. The ER doctor examined me, ran scans, came back with the worst news. My pelvis was shattered, 3 fractures. One was near the hip socket. I needed surgery within 6 hours, or I risked permanent nerve damage, possibly paralysis, possibly death if internal bleeding started. They needed my mother's consent. I was 16. In Arizona, a parent or legal guardian has to authorize surgery for a minor except in life-threatening emergencies. And the hospital's policy was strict. They needed documented consent. My grandfather kept calling. No answer. He called the cruise line. They said they'd try to reach her. He gave them the hospital number. He told them it was an emergency. They said they'd relay the message. 2 hours passed. I was in so much pain I couldn't think. They gave me morphine, but it barely touched it. I remember my grandfather sitting next to my bed. His hand was shaking. He was scared. I'd never seen him scared before. Then his phone rang. It was my mother. Finally. He put it on speaker so the doctor could hear. He said, "Diane, Emma's in the hospital. She has a shattered pelvis. She needs surgery right away, or she could lose the ability to walk. We need your consent." And my mother said, "How bad is it really? Is she going to die?" The doctor said, "There's a risk of complications if we don't operate soon. Internal bleeding, nerve damage. She needs this surgery." And my mother said, "I'm in the middle of a spa treatment. I paid $400 for this. Can't this wait until I get back? I'm on a cruise. I'm not canceling my trip for a broken bone." My grandfather said, "Diane, she could be paralyzed." My mother said, "She's fine. She's talking, isn't she? If she doesn't pull through, just let me know." And then she hung up. I remember my grandfather's face. He looked at the doctor. He looked at me. And then he pulled out his phone, opened an app, and pressed record. 3 hours after the accident, the doctor looked at my grandfather and said, "We can invoke the emergency exception. If there's imminent risk to life or permanent injury, we can proceed without parental consent. But we'll need documentation that we tried to reach the parent and that delay would cause harm." My grandfather said, "I recorded the call. I have her refusing consent. I have your medical assessment. What else do you need?" The doctor looked surprised. He said, "That's actually helpful. Let me talk to our legal department." While the doctor was gone, my grandfather sat next to me. He said, "Emma, I'm not letting anything happen to you. Do you trust me?" I said yes. He said, "Good. Because I'm about to do something I've been thinking about for a long time. Your mother has failed you for the last time." I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. The doctor came back. He said the hospital could proceed under the emergency exception. They had my grandfather's recording of my mother's refusal. They had the medical assessment. They had documentation of attempts to reach her. They were covered legally. I went into surgery 3 hours after the accident. 4-hour procedure. They put in 2 plates and 6 screws. They said I was lucky. Another hour, and I might have had permanent damage. When I woke up, my grandfather was there. He'd been there the whole time. He said, "You're going to be okay, but we need to talk about what happens next." I was groggy. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Your mother isn't coming back early. I called her after your surgery. She said she's glad you're fine and she'll see you in 5 days when the cruise ends." Emma, that's not a mother. That's not someone who should have custody of you. I started crying. Not because I was surprised, because he was right, and because I'd spent 16 years pretending it didn't hurt. He said, "I'm going to get you out of this, but I need your help. I need you to tell me everything. Every time she's let you down. Every time she's chosen something else over you. Every time you felt like you didn't matter. Can you do that?" I said yes. And that's when my grandfather started building his case. But there was a problem. My mother found out what he was doing. She called him one night, screaming, "You're trying to take my daughter away from me. You're manipulating her. You're poisoning her against me. This ends now." My grandfather stayed calm. He said, "Diane, I'm documenting the truth. If you don't like what I'm documenting, change your behavior." She hung up. He added the recording to the file. He bought a small notebook, the kind you can fit in a pocket. He started writing everything down. Dates. Times. What happened? Who was there? He asked me to do the same. He said, "We're going to document everything from now on. Every phone call, every text message, every time she doesn't show up, every time she prioritizes anything over your safety or well-being." I thought he was overreacting at first. But he wasn't. He was being strategic. 3 days after my surgery, my mother came to the hospital. She walked in with a Starbucks cup. She looked at me and said, "You look fine. I knew it wasn't that serious. You kids are so dramatic." My grandfather said, "Diane, she had emergency surgery. She almost died." My mother rolled her eyes. She said, "But she didn't. And now I missed half my cruise. I'm not getting that money back." I didn't say anything. I just watched my grandfather's hand move toward his phone. He pressed record. I don't think my mother even noticed. She stayed for 20 minutes. She complained about the cruise. She complained about the hospital. She complained about how expensive the parking was. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't ask about my recovery. She didn't ask if I needed anything. Then she left. She said she had to get back to work. She said she'd check on me later. She didn't come back. My grandfather stopped the recording. He looked at me and said, "That's evidence." I said, "Evidence of what?" He said, "That she's unfit. That she doesn't prioritize your welfare. That you're not safe in her care. Emma, I'm going to file for emergency guardianship. And then I'm going to file for permanent custody. And I'm going to win." I didn't believe him at first. My mother was my mother. The courts wouldn't just take me away from her. Would they? He said, "They will if I prove she's a danger to you. And I'm going to prove it." For the next 6 months, my grandfather became a different person. He was methodical, obsessive. He documented everything. He used his iPhone for everything. He showed me the apps he was using, the voice recorder app for phone calls and conversations, the notes app for logging incidents with timestamps, the photos app for screenshots of text messages and emails. And here's what's interesting. My mother had no idea any of this was happening. She thought everything was normal. She thought I'd just get over it. She had no clue my grandfather was building a legal case that would end her custody forever. He set up access to my medical records through the hospital's online portal. He saved every document, every bill, every treatment plan, every note from the doctors about the surgery and the risks I'd faced. He requested records from my school, attendance records, emergency contact logs, every time my mother had been called and hadn't shown up, every time my grandfather had been the one to pick me up when I was sick. He filed a complaint with Child Protective Services. He included the hospital records. He included the recording of my mother's refusal to authorize surgery. He included his documentation of the cruise. He said he wasn't asking them to remove me from her care yet. He was establishing a record. He wanted them to investigate. CPS opened a case. They interviewed my mother. They interviewed me. They interviewed my grandfather. They interviewed the hospital staff. They reviewed the evidence. The investigator told my grandfather that it was one of the most thorough documentation efforts she'd ever seen from a family member. She said most people come to CPS with feelings. He came with facts. 6 weeks after the accident, CPS issued a finding. They said my mother had neglected my medical needs. They didn't remove me from her care. But they put her on a supervision plan. The CPS supervision plan meant my mother had to attend parenting classes, submit to regular home visits, and check in monthly with a caseworker. It would stay on her record. And if she violated any of the terms, I could be removed from her care immediately. The CPS investigator told my grandfather something that changed everything. She said, "In 15 years of doing this job, I've never seen a family member prepare documentation like you have. Most people come to us with emotions. You came with evidence. That's why this case will stick." My mother was furious. She blamed my grandfather. She blamed me. She said I was turning everyone against her. She said I was being manipulative. She said I was lying about how bad the accident had been. My grandfather recorded every conversation. He saved every text message. He added it all to the file. By the time we got to court, he had 47 pages of evidence: medical records, CPS reports, recordings, text messages, photos, witness statements from family members, a timeline of neglect going back years. He hired a lawyer who specialized in family law. He paid for it himself. He said it was the best investment he'd ever make. The lawyer looked at the file and said, "This is airtight. I've never seen documentation this thorough. You've essentially built the case for me." My grandfather said, "I'm not taking any chances. She almost killed my granddaughter. I'm not letting her have another opportunity. Let me show you what 6 months of documentation looks like." Because my grandfather didn't just collect evidence, he organized it. He made it impossible for any judge to ignore. Week 1 after the accident, I was discharged from the hospital. My mother didn't pick me up. My grandfather did. He documented it. He took a photo of the discharge papers with the timestamp. He noted that my mother had been called and said she was busy at work. Week 2. I had a follow-up appointment with the orthopedic surgeon. My mother didn't come. My grandfather came. He recorded the doctor's instructions. He saved the treatment plan. He noted that my mother hadn't called to ask how the appointment went. Week 3. I needed help at home. I couldn't walk without crutches. I couldn't carry things. I couldn't go upstairs easily. My grandfather moved in with us temporarily. He cooked. He helped me get dressed. He drove me to physical therapy. My mother came home from work, ate dinner, and went to her room. My grandfather noted every day she didn't ask how I was feeling. Month 2. My mother started saying I was faking the pain. She said I was milking the injury for attention. She said I should be back to normal by now. My grandfather recorded her saying this. He showed the recording to the physical therapist. The therapist confirmed in writing that I was following the recovery plan exactly and that my mother's expectations were medically unrealistic. Month 3. My mother started talking about another cruise. She said she deserved a break. She said taking care of me was exhausting. My grandfather noted the dates. She hadn't taken care of me for a single day. He had. Month 4. CPS did a follow-up visit. They interviewed my mother. She told them everything was fine. She told them I was doing great. She told them she'd been very involved in my care. The investigator then interviewed me separately. I told the truth. I said my grandfather had been the one taking care of me. The investigator noted the discrepancy. Months 5 and 6 blurred together. My mother missed my 17th birthday completely. My grandfather took me to dinner, made sure I felt celebrated. Meanwhile, his lawyer was finalizing the guardianship petition. When my mother received the court papers, she called screaming, said he was trying to steal me, said she'd fight, said she'd win. My grandfather said calmly, "I'll see you in court," then hung up, added the recording to the file. During those 6 months, my grandfather taught me something important. He said, "Emma, the world won't always believe you just because you're telling the truth. You need evidence. You need documentation. You need to be smarter than the people who want to hurt you." He sat me down and said, "Emma, I'm going to teach you something that could save your life someday." He pulled up his iPhone, opened voice recorder, hit the red button before any important conversation. The app timestamps everything automatically. After the call, hit share, save it to files, and name it with the date and person's name. That's evidence that holds up in court. He showed me his Files app, hundreds of recordings, each one labeled, Mom Hospital Refusal April 15, Mom Visit Complaints April 18, CPS Interview May 2. Every conversation, organized, time-stamped, undeniable. He showed me how to save text messages by taking screenshots. He showed me how to access my own medical records through the hospital portal. He showed me how to keep a journal with dates and times. He said, "You're going to be an adult soon, and you need to know how to protect yourself. Because your mother isn't the only person in the world who will try to take advantage of you, but you can stop them if you're prepared." I learned. I watched him. I took notes. And I started my own documentation. Every conversation with my mother. Every time she lied. Every time she tried to rewrite history. I had proof. By the time the court date arrived 6 months later, I wasn't scared. I was ready. CPS was on our side. They'd seen the evidence. They'd seen my mother's failure to change. They'd seen my grandfather's consistent care. They submitted their own report recommending that guardianship be transferred to my grandfather. The hospital submitted records confirming the surgery was life-saving and that my mother had refused consent. They submitted the doctor's testimony that the delay could have caused permanent harm. They submitted the emergency exception documentation. My school submitted attendance records showing that my grandfather had been listed as my emergency contact for over a year, that he was the one who picked me up when I was sick, that my mother had never attended a parent-teacher conference in the last 3 years, and my grandfather submitted his 47-page binder. Every piece of evidence, every recording, every text message, every medical record, every CPS report, organized chronologically, tabbed by category, with a table of contents. He'd even included a summary page at the beginning, a 1-page overview of the case. It said, "Diane refused life-saving surgery for her daughter so she wouldn't have to cancel a cruise. This is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern of neglect spanning 16 years. The evidence shows she prioritizes her own comfort and convenience over her daughter's safety, health, and well-being. I am requesting permanent guardianship to protect Emma from further harm." The lawyer said it was the most professional case file he'd ever seen from a non-lawyer. My grandfather said, "I was a Marine. I know how to prepare." October 15th, 2023. Courtroom 4, B, Maricopa County Superior Court. This was it. Everything my grandfather had documented for 6 months would be presented to a single judge who would decide my future. My mother showed up with her own lawyer. She was dressed in a business suit, hair done, makeup perfect. She looked like a responsible parent. She looked nothing like the woman who'd told the hospital to just let her know if I died. My grandfather was in a button-down shirt and slacks. No tie. He looked tired. He'd been up late the night before making sure the binder was perfect. Making sure every piece of evidence was in order. Making sure nothing was missing. The judge was a woman in her 60s, Judge Patricia Morales. She had a reputation for being tough but fair. My grandfather's lawyer said that was good. She didn't tolerate BS. She cared about the facts. My mother's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of a devoted single mother who'd made one mistake in a moment of panic. He said my mother was on a cruise, far from home, unable to fully understand the severity of the situation. He said she'd been led to believe it was just a broken bone. He said she'd come to the hospital as soon as she could. He said she loved me. He said she wanted me home. He said my grandfather was overreacting. He said he was manipulating me. He said he was trying to alienate me from my mother. He said there was no pattern of neglect. He said this was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. And then our lawyer stood up. He didn't argue. He didn't debate. He just presented the evidence. He played the recording of my mother's refusal. Twice. He showed the medical records proving I was hours from permanent injury. He showed the CPS reports, the school records, the text messages, the witness statements, the 47-page binder. And then he said the words that changed everything. "Your Honor, this is not a custody dispute. This is a safety issue. Emma was hours away from permanent harm because her mother prioritized a spa treatment over her daughter's life. That is not a mistake. That is a choice. and it is a pattern. He showed the judge page after page, every piece of evidence, every recording, every document. 6 months of proof that my mother was unfit. 6 months of proof that my grandfather had been my real parent all along. Then the judge asked if I wanted to speak. She said I didn't have to. But she said if I wanted to, she would listen. I said yes. My grandfather's lawyer had prepared me. He'd told me to be honest, to be calm, to focus on the facts, not to attack my mother, not to be emotional, just to tell the truth. I stood up. I walked to the front of the courtroom. My legs were shaking, but I made it. The judge said, "Emma, take your time. Tell me what you want to say." I said, "Your Honor, I don't hate my mother, but I don't trust her. She told the hospital to let her know if I died. She didn't cancel her cruise. She didn't come home early. She didn't even call me after my surgery to see if I was okay. She came to the hospital 3 days later, and she complained about the parking." I said, "My grandfather was there. He was there when I woke up from surgery. He was there every single day of my recovery. He helped me walk. He took me to physical therapy. He made sure I took my medication. He made sure I ate. He made sure I didn't feel alone." I said, "My mother told me I was faking the pain. She told me I was dramatic. She told me I was making a big deal out of nothing. My grandfather told me I was strong. He told me I was going to be okay. He told me I mattered." I said, "I'm 17 now. In a year I'll be 18, and I can make my own decisions. But right now, I'm asking you to make this decision for me. I'm asking you to let me stay with my grandfather. Because he's the only parent I've ever really had." I sat back down. My hands were still shaking, but I'd said everything I needed to say. The judge looked at my mother. She said, "Diane, do you have anything you'd like to say?" My mother stood up. She said, "Your Honor, I love my daughter. I made a mistake. I was scared. I was far from home. I didn't know how serious it was. I'm sorry. I want another chance." The judge said, "You had 16 years of chances. You had 6 months after the CPS intervention to show you were willing to change. You didn't complete the parenting classes. You didn't attend the check-ins. You didn't demonstrate any effort to improve. Why should I believe you'll change now?" My mother didn't have an answer. The judge closed the file. She looked at my mother, then at my grandfather, then at me. "Diane, you have failed in your fundamental duty as a parent. You prioritized your own desires over your daughter's life. You are unfit to have custody." She turned to my grandfather. "Robert, you have demonstrated the care and consistency required of a parent. I am granting permanent legal guardianship to you. Diane, your parental rights are terminated." She said the words I'd been waiting to hear for 6 months. "You will have no custody, no visitation, no decision-making authority." She looked at me. "Emma, if you choose to have a relationship with your mother in the future, that will be your choice. But she no longer has any legal claim to you." Then she said 2 words that changed everything. "Court adjourned." My mother started crying. Her lawyer put his hand on her shoulder. She looked at me. She looked at my grandfather. She stood up and walked out of the courtroom. She didn't say a word. My grandfather sat very still for a moment. Then he turned to me. He said, "You're safe now. She can't hurt you anymore." And for the first time in 6 months, I let myself breathe. It's been 18 months since the court ruling. I'm 19 now, in college, studying pre-law. I want to help other kids who don't have a voice. I live with my grandfather in a bigger house he bought so I could have my own room. My mother moved to California 6 months later. I heard she's dating someone new, starting over. I don't think about it much anymore. I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. I'm just done. I gave her 16 years to be my mother. She chose not to be. That's on her, not on me. My grandfather is 70 now. He's healthy. He's active. He still goes to the gym 3 times a week. He still shows up for everything. He came to my high school graduation. He helped me move into my dorm. He calls me every Sunday to make sure I'm okay. People ask me sometimes if I miss my mother, and the honest answer is no. You can't miss something you never had. But I'll tell you what I do have. I have a grandfather who fought for me, who documented every failure, who built a case so strong that no judge could ignore it, who used a smartphone and a notebook to protect me when the system almost failed me. I have the knowledge he gave me. I know how to protect myself. I know how to document. I know how to build evidence. I know how to stand up for myself. I know my worth. And I have the peace of knowing that I'm safe, that I'm loved, that I matter. My grandfather taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about who stays. It's about who fights for you when everyone else walks away. He showed up, he stayed, he fought, and he won. And because of him, I get to build a life where I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this. Document everything. If someone is harming you, if someone is neglecting you, if someone is failing you, document it. Save the texts. Record the calls. Keep a journal. Take screenshots. Get witness statements. Build your case. Because the truth is, the world won't always believe you just because you're telling the truth. But they will believe evidence. They will believe documentation. They will believe facts. My grandfather gave me that. He gave me the tools to protect myself. He gave me the proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't dramatic, that I deserved better. And now I get to live a life where I'm not waiting for someone to choose me, because I already chose myself, and my grandfather chose me, and that's enough.